If you're trying to build discipline without a purpose, you're basically asking yourself to suffer for no reason, and your brain is too smart for that. It will bargain, delay, numb out, and eventually quit. Not because you're weak, but because pain without meaning feels like punishment. Marcus Aurelius understood this in a way that still stings because it's so direct. He wasn't writing to sound wise. He was writing to keep himself from drifting. He was the most powerful man in the world, and still had to remind himself, privately, to do what was right instead of what was easy. That alone should sober you up. Discipline isn't something you achieve once. It's something you return to on purpose every day. Purpose is what makes that return possible. When you have a clear reason, effort stops feeling like random discomfort and starts feeling like construction. You're not just forcing yourself, you're building something. And when you're building something you respect, you can tolerate discomfort without falling apart, because the discomfort becomes part of the price, not a sign that something is wrong. If you don't have that reason, here's what happens in real life. You start your day with good intentions, but when resistance shows up, fatigue, boredom, anxiety, distraction, you don't have a strong enough anchor to hold you in place. So you negotiate. I'll do it later. I'll start tomorrow. I'll just take a break. And those sentences feel harmless until you realize they're training your brain to treat your standards as optional. Short landing line. A vague purpose creates a negotiable life. So what does purpose mean in a Stoic sense? It's not a motivational poster. It's not follow your passion. Marcus keeps returning to something more grounded. Your duty to live with virtue, meaning to act with reason, courage, justice, and self-control, regardless of mood. In modern terms, purpose is the standard you refuse to betray, even when nobody is watching. That standard can be humble. It doesn't have to be heroic, but it has to be specific. Because your brain doesn't obey abstract inspiration, it obeys clear aims. You can feel the difference immediately. I want to be disciplined is fog. For the next 30 days, I will train my body and mind so I can be reliable. To my family, to my work, to myself is a target. A target gives you direction when you're tired. It gives you leverage when you're tempted. It reduces debate because the decision has already been made. And here's the hidden benefit. Purpose reduces emotional noise. When you know what matters, less matters. You stop letting small impulses run your schedule because you're anchored to something bigger than the impulse. Now let's make this practical in the cleanest way possible. Don't write 10 goals. Don't create a life manifesto. Do one thing that forces clarity. Write one sentence that describes the purpose of your next 30 days. One sentence, not poetic, useful. It should answer, what am I building, and why does it matter enough to feel discomfort for it? Then read that sentence right before your hardest daily task. Not after. Before. That's when it matters, because that's when your brain starts offering exits. If you want a template, keep it simple. For the next 30 days, I'm building Ryan Sai, so that, no Ryan Science. Fill in the blanks and make it real. Strength so you can protect your health. Focus so you can stop living in distraction. Emotional control so you stop paying for your reactions. Financial discipline so you stop trading your future for quick relief. Once that purpose sentence exists, you're no longer relying on mood to carry you. You're relying on a decision, and that takes us to the next Stoic pillar, because purpose alone isn't enough. The next step is sovereignty, learning to stop wasting your energy on what you can't control and locking your discipline onto what is actually yours. your actions, your judgments, your choices. Discipline collapses the moment you start trying to control the wrong thing. You can feel it when you're frustrated and you don't even know why. You're tense, you're distracted, you're tempted to quit, and the real reason is that your mind is spending energy fighting reality. You're trying to control outcomes. You're trying to control other people's reactions. You're trying to control timing, fairness, recognition. And when the world doesn't cooperate, you burn emotional fuel. Then you call the exhaustion lack of discipline. Marcus would call that a misunderstanding of power. For the Stoics, the foundation is the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to you, and some things are not. What's up to you is your judgment, your effort, your choices, what you do next. What's not up to you is the outcome, the applause, the mood of other people, the past, the randomness of life. The moment you mix those categories, you become unstable because you attach your behavior to things you can't command. Here's what that looks like in modern life. You plan to work out, but you don't feel motivated, so you wait for the feeling. You plan to focus, but you don't feel inspired, so you drift. You want to build a habit, but you don't see results fast, so you quit. That's outcome-based discipline, and it fails because it's built on something you don't control. Stoic discipline is process-based. It's built on what you can always control, showing up and executing the next right action, regardless of whether you feel like it, and regardless of what happens afterward. Short landing line. Outcomes are weather, actions are power. This changes how you think in the moment where most people break. When you're tired, when you're irritated, when you're tempted, your brain tries to pull you into the uncontrollable because it offers emotional drama. Drama feels like movement, but it's fake movement. It's just energy leaking. The Stoic move is to redirect instantly to the controllable, not with a long speech. With one clean question: is this mine to control? If the answer is no, if it's someone else's opinion, an outcome you can't guarantee, a delay you can't erase, then your job is to drop the struggle and choose the next controllable action. This isn't passive. It's aggressive focus. You're pulling your mind out of a losing fight and putting it into a winning one. You don't control whether people respect you. You control whether you live in a respectable way. You don't control whether your work gets praised. You control whether your work is done well. You don't control whether the day goes smoothly. You control whether your response is stable. That's why this principle builds discipline so fast. It stops you from burning fuel on fantasies. Now, make it practical. Discipline isn't proven in calm moments. It's proven in the moment something goes wrong. So here's the test you'll run today. The next time stress hits, an annoying message, a setback, a temptation to procrastinate, pause for half a beat and ask, is this mine to control? If it isn't, you immediately pick one controllable action and do it within the next 60 seconds. It can be small. Send the one email you've been avoiding. Do the first set. Open the document and write one sentence. Clean one corner of the mess. The point isn't the size. The point is the switch. You're training your brain to move from reaction to action. This is the way you build a mind that doesn't collapse under friction. You stop treating reality as a negotiation. You treat it as a place to practice virtue. And now we go one step deeper, because there's a mindset that destroys discipline even faster than chasing outcomes: the victim mindset. It feels comforting in the moment, but it steals your agency, and without agency, discipline is impossible. The victim mindset is the fastest way to dissolve discipline because it teaches your brain one fatal lesson. I'm not responsible. And if you're not responsible, there's no reason to act. This is hard to hear, but it's liberating once you accept it. Victim thinking feels like relief because it removes pressure. You get to blame the schedule, the past, the unfairness, other people's behavior, your genetics, your mood. You get to say, "What do you expect from me?" And for a moment, that story lowers your stress. But it also removes your power. Marcus never pretends life is fair. He's blunt about the fact that you will deal with difficult people, obstacles, loss, sickness, random events you didn't choose. But his focus is relentless. The only thing you truly own is your response. That's not motivational, that's strategic, because the moment you make your progress dependent on fairness, you become dependent on something you can't command. Short landing line: blaming feels good until it costs you your life. The victim mindset isn't always dramatic. Most of the time it's subtle. It's the quiet sentence you repeat to yourself that gives you permission to drift. I'm just not disciplined. I'm too tired. I have too much going on. People don't support me. My situation is different. Sometimes those sentences are describing real pain. Sometimes they're even true. But the question isn't whether they're true. The question is whether they make you act. Stoicism doesn't deny pain. It denies surrender. Because the brutal truth is this: you can have a perfect explanation and still have a ruined life. The explanation won't save you, only action will. This is why Marcus keeps returning to a kind of inner severity. Stop performing suffering. Start practicing virtue. He isn't saying, be cold. He's saying, be effective. The world will hand you difficulty anyway. The only question is whether difficulty becomes an excuse or becomes training. Now, let's make it practical in a way you can actually apply without turning your whole day into philosophy. You need one move that breaks victim thinking on contact. One move that converts complaint into agency. Here it is. The moment you notice yourself complaining, internally or out loud, convert it into one ownership statement followed by one next action. Not, I should. Not, I hope. One next action. Example, I'm exhausted and I don't have time. Convert it. I can still do the first 10 minutes. I'm starting now. Example, no one helps me. Convert it. I'm asking directly for what I need, and then I'm doing my part. Example, this always happens to me. Convert it. I'm changing one variable today. You're not pretending life is fair. You're refusing to be powerless. This works because your brain learns by repetition. If you repeatedly allow the complaint to be the ending, your brain starts treating complaint as completion. It feels like you did something because you expressed something. But nothing changed. When you attach a next action, you retrain the circuit. Emotion becomes fuel, not a trap. So the test for today is simple. Catch one complaint, just one, then rewrite it into agency in real time, even if you don't feel like it, especially if you don't feel like it. That's the point. And this leads to the next pillar, because once you stop playing the victim, you face the real question. Can you count on yourself? Discipline is not willpower. Discipline is self-trust. If you keep breaking promises to yourself, your brain stops believing you. And once you become negotiable to yourself, everything becomes negotiable. You don't rise to your goals. You sink to your self-trust. That's the uncomfortable law underneath discipline. If you can't count on yourself, nothing you plan matters, because the part of you that plans and the part of you that acts are living in two different realities. The planner makes promises, the actor breaks them. And after enough cycles, your brain stops believing your own words. That's what people call lack of motivation. A lot of the time it's actually broken credibility. Marcus Aurelius writes to himself the way you would write to someone you love but don't fully trust yet, firm, honest and repetitive in the right way. Not because he enjoyed lecturing himself, but because he knew the mind drifts. It rationalizes. It makes excuses sound intelligent. So he kept returning to a standard. Do what is right, do your duty, and stop acting as if your mood is a command. That's not harshness. That's the only way to build a self you can rely on. Because here's the hidden mechanism. Every time you make yourself a promise and break it, you teach your brain, my intentions are not binding. And once that lesson settles in, your mind starts negotiating automatically. It doesn't even feel like self-sabotage anymore. It feels normal. You'll say, I'll start tomorrow, and a part of you will quietly smile because it knows tomorrow is also negotiable. Short landing line. Broken promises create a negotiable identity. So the goal is not to become intense. The goal is to become dependable to yourself. How do you do that without turning your life into a rigid boot camp? You stop making dramatic promises. You start making small, enforceable ones. You build self-trust the same way you build trust with another person, by keeping commitments that are clear, realistic, and consistent. Most people do the opposite. They make huge promises when they're inspired, then they break them when they're tired. And the break teaches the brain a deeper cynicism. Even when I'm excited, I don't follow through. That cynicism becomes a weight you carry into every new habit. You start with less hope, less energy, less belief. Not because you're damaged, but because you trained that response. So the fix has to be surgical. One promise, small enough that you can't justify breaking it, repeated long enough that your brain starts believing you again. Pick the discipline habit that matters most. Training, writing, studying, building a business, stopping a destructive behavior, and shrink it down to an entry-level promise. Not the whole workout, the start. Not a full chapter, one page. Not a deep work session, 10 minutes of real focus. The point is to create a commitment you can keep on your worst day, because worst days are where trust is built. Then you keep it. No drama, no negotiation. If you feel great, you can do more. If you feel terrible, you still do the minimum. That's how the identity shifts. You become the kind of person who follows through regardless of mood. Here's the test you'll run for the next 7 days. Choose one tiny promise and keep it daily. Make it so small it feels almost insulting, and that's how you know it will work. The insult is your ego wanting intensity. Ignore it. Your ego wants to impress you. Your brain wants evidence. If you want to make it even stronger, attach the promise to a fixed time or a fixed trigger. After I brush my teeth, I do 10 minutes. When I get home, I do the first set. A trigger removes the daily debate, and debate is where discipline dies. And once self-trust begins to return, something changes fast. You stop needing to hype yourself up. You stop needing perfect conditions. You start moving because you believe you will. That naturally leads to the next pillar, showing up every day. Not because intensity is impressive, but because consistency removes negotiation, and negotiation is the real enemy. Consistency isn't glamorous. It's decisive, because the real battle isn't effort. The real battle is the daily debate. Most people don't fail because they can't do the work. They fail because they keep reopening the question of whether they should do the work. Every morning becomes a courtroom. You present arguments. You cross-examine your mood. You negotiate with fatigue. And even if you win sometimes, the constant trial drains you. By the time you decide, you've already spent the energy you needed to execute. Marcus is almost ruthless about this. He treats the day like a duty, not a drama. He doesn't ask himself, "Do I feel like being strong today?" He asks, "What does the moment require?" That's the Stoic upgrade. You stop asking permission from your feelings. Short landing line. Discipline dies in discussion. Showing up every day is how you end the discussion. It turns your habit into something as normal as brushing your teeth, something you don't evaluate emotionally each time. Here's the subtle benefit most people miss. Consistency reduces the emotional cost of starting. Starting is the most expensive part of any habit. It's where resistance concentrates. Once you start, the rest often becomes easier. But if you make starting rare, only when you're motivated, then starting never becomes familiar, and resistance stays high. Showing up daily trains your brain to treat the beginning as normal. This is also why all or nothing people stay stuck. They think discipline means big days. They wait until they have perfect time and perfect energy. Then they do a heroic session, feel proud, and disappear for 3 days. That pattern feels intense, but it's unstable. It teaches your brain that effort is an event instead of a rule. In the long run, events don't shape you. Rules shape you. So what does daily showing up look like in real life? It looks like protecting the start, not the finish. You don't need to promise yourself you'll train for an hour. You need to promise you'll begin at the scheduled time. The beginning is the point of discipline. Duration is optional. Intensity is optional. The start is not. This is the move that makes people dangerous in the best way. They become predictable to themselves. If you want to think about it visually, treat your habit like a train. The train departs at the same time every day. If you feel like it, you ride longer. If you don't, you still get on for one stop. The departure time doesn't negotiate with your mood. It just departs. Now make it real. Choose one habit that represents your discipline: training, writing, studying, business building, and choose a fixed start time you can keep most days. Then the rule is only this: when the time hits, you begin. Even if it's ugly, even if it's small, even if you're not inspired. Your brain will try to argue. It will say, "Not now, later, you're tired, you don't have time." Let it talk. Begin anyway. Starting while the voice argues is the training. That's literally the discipline muscle being built. Over a week, something changes. You stop seeing the habit as a choice. You start seeing it as part of your identity. And identity is the most stable fuel source there is. Try it for 7 days. Pick a start time, and when that time hits, do the first action of the habit within the next 2 minutes. Not after you feel ready. That 2-minute window matters because it prevents the mind from expanding the debate. You're moving before the lawyer in your head builds the case. Once you can show up daily, we go to the next level. The level the Stoics were famous for: training discomfort on purpose. Voluntary hardship, delayed gratification, not as punishment, but as preparation, so life can't break you with small discomforts. If you can only do what's easy, you're not disciplined, you're just comfortable. The Stoics weren't impressed by comfort, they were impressed by readiness. Marcus Aurelius had wealth, status, power, yet his private writing is full of reminders not to become soft, not to become addicted to ease, not to become the kind of person who collapses when the world stops catering to him. He understood something that still applies directly to you. A life built around avoiding discomfort becomes a life controlled by discomfort. Voluntary hardship is the antidote. It means you choose small discomforts on purpose so that discomfort loses its power over you. Not because suffering is noble, because training is useful. Short landing line. You don't rise in crisis. You reveal your training. This is where people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is white-knuckling through tasks. The Stoic version is deeper. Discipline is tolerance. Tolerance for boredom. Tolerance for delay. Tolerance for effort. Tolerance for being misunderstood. Tolerance for not getting immediate reward. If you lack that tolerance, life will push you around because life is full of friction. Voluntary hardship trains your nervous system to stay stable while friction exists. It teaches your brain discomfort is not danger. And that single lesson upgrades everything: your work, your health, your relationships. Because you stop needing the world to feel good before you act well. Delayed gratification is the same muscle in a different costume. It's choosing the future over the present moment's appetite. It's saying no to a quick hit so you can say yes to a deeper life. The reason this matters is that your brain is always offering you a trade. Relief now, regret later. Discipline is refusing that trade often enough that your identity changes. Now, this can turn into performance if you're not careful. People love dramatic hardship because it looks impressive. The Stoic approach is quieter and more strategic. You pick one controlled discomfort and you repeat it until your mind stops making it a crisis. That's training. It's not a stunt. Here are examples that work because they're simple and repeatable. You finish your shower cold for the last minute. You delay your first meal a little to prove you can tolerate a desire without obeying it. You keep your phone out of your first hour so your mind doesn't start the day addicted. You take the stairs when you don't feel like it. You do the hard conversation without rehearsing it for a week. You do the first set, the first page, the first uncomfortable minute, because starting is where the brain begs for escape. The key is not which hardship you choose. The key is the posture. You're choosing it. You're practicing command. And command is what delayed gratification really is. It's you deciding that your impulses don't get the final vote. So here's the experiment you'll run for the next week. Pick one daily, hard thing, one rule, and keep it steady. Not 5 rules. 1. You're building a muscle, not building a prison. Then watch for the real outcome, which is not bragging rights. The outcome is this. Your mind stops negotiating so much. Your tolerance increases. The world feels less threatening because your nervous system is less fragile. Work becomes easier because you're no longer looking for comfort before you start. This also connects directly to the dichotomy of control, because voluntary hardship trains you to focus on what you can control, your response, your choices, rather than whining about what you can't. It's Stoicism in motion. Now, we need to handle a major social force that destroys discipline in people who are otherwise capable. Naysayers, criticism, mockery, doubt. Sometimes from strangers, sometimes from family, sometimes from people who benefit when you stay small. Stoicism has a clean way to deal with that without becoming bitter. If other people's opinions can steer your behavior, you don't own your discipline. They do. Most people don't lose discipline because they're lazy. They lose it because they're socially porous. A comment gets under their skin. A friend laughs at the new habit. A family member questions their goal. A stranger online calls them delusional. And suddenly the work feels heavier, not because the work changed, but because now you're carrying an extra invisible weight, the need to be approved. Marcus had a brutal clarity about this. He reminds himself, again and again, that the crowd is unstable, that praise and blame are both outside your control, and that it's irrational to hand your inner life to people who don't even know how to govern their own. The Stoic move is not to hate people, it's to refuse their control. Short landing line. You can't build a strong life with borrowed confidence. Here's the deeper mechanism. When someone criticizes you, your brain treats it like a threat to belonging. Belonging has survival weight, so your nervous system spikes, and your mind starts doing something dangerous. It starts editing your behavior to reduce social discomfort. You pull back, you soften the goal, you delay. You stop showing up with the same intensity, not because you changed your mind, but because you wanted the tension to end. That's why ignore naysayers sounds like a cliché until you see the cost of not doing it. The cost is that your life becomes a negotiation with the loudest voice in the room, and the loudest voice is rarely the wisest voice. So how do you apply this in a way that's stoic, not performative? First, you separate signal from noise. Some criticism is useful, most is emotional discharge. The easiest test is this. Does this person have the kind of character and results you would want to emulate? If not, their opinion might still be information, but it cannot be authority. Second, you stop debating with every voice. Debate creates the illusion that the critic deserves a seat at the table. A lot of voices don't. The Stoics would say, let them talk, you keep your duty. Third, you replace passive influence with chosen influence. This is the part most people skip. They try to block out negativity while they continue consuming randomness all day. Random feeds, random opinions, random people. You don't win that way. Discipline is partly environmental. If your inputs are chaotic, your mind becomes chaotic. This is where the other half of your outline becomes essential. Emulate the wise. Marcus admired people with character. The Stoics weren't isolated geniuses. They studied examples. They looked for models of courage, patience, and self-command, because the human brain learns by imitation. You will imitate someone. The only question is whether you chose them. So make it strategic. Pick one person, ancient or modern, whose character you respect. Not someone famous for noise, someone known for steadiness, someone who does the work. Then take one principle from them and apply it daily. Not as inspiration, as modeling. You can do this with Marcus himself. One of his most useful lines, paraphrased, is basically, do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. That's not poetry. That's a daily operating system. Now make it practical today with one clean move. Do an environment cut. Choose one source of distraction or negativity, one account, one feed, one chat thread, one person you allow to drain you, and reduce access to it. Mute it. Unfollow. Leave it unread. Not as an emotional reaction, but as a strategic choice. Then replace that input with one source of strength. A few pages from a book with substance, a short talk from someone you respect, a passage of Stoic writing, something that upgrades your standards instead of lowering them. The point isn't to build a bubble. The point is to protect your mind while you're building. Early discipline is fragile. You don't expose a seed to a storm and then blame it for not growing. Short landing line. Protect the seed, then you can handle the weather. And once you do that, once you stop being socially steered, there's one final piece that makes discipline inevitable: honest review. Because improvement doesn't come from intensity, it comes from feedback. Marcus wrote at night for a reason. He used reflection as calibration, not as self-punishment. That's where we go next. If you don't review your day, you don't really change. You just repeat. Discipline isn't built by promises. It's built by feedback. You do something, you see what it produced, you adjust. Without that loop, even smart people drift, because the mind is excellent at one thing, rewriting the story so you feel fine even when you're slipping. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to inspire an audience. He wrote them to correct himself. That's the part you should respect. He was using reflection as a tool of command. He'd look at the day, name what was weak, name what was right, and then return to the standard, not with guilt, with clarity. Short landing line: what gets inspected gets improved. Most people avoid review for two reasons. 1, they don't want to feel bad. 2, they don't want to admit they're inconsistent. But the irony is that avoiding the review keeps the inconsistency alive. It's like refusing to look at a bank statement because you're afraid of what you'll see, while the spending continues anyway. The Stoic approach is cleaner. You separate judgment from diagnosis. The review is not a moral trial, it's a tactical debrief. You're not attacking yourself, you're studying yourself. And this matters because your brain has patterns you can't feel in the moment. In the moment, temptation feels like truth. In the moment, procrastination feels justified. In the moment, anger feels righteous. The review breaks the spell. It lets you see the mechanism after the emotion fades. So what do you review? Not your entire life. Not 10 categories. Keep it tight enough that you'll actually do it. 2 lines. First line: what did I do well today? This trains self-respect. It stops you from treating discipline like self-hatred. You need to acknowledge kept promises because self-trust grows on evidence. Second line: where did I betray my standard today, and what will I do instead tomorrow? This is the part most people avoid, and it's the part that changes you. You're not saying, "I'm awful." You're saying, "That move costs me. Tomorrow, I'll run a different move." Notice the structure. You identify the trigger, then you choose the replacement action. That's behavior change. That's how you turn discipline into a skill instead of a mood. Here's an example that makes it concrete. Let's say you planned to work, but you scrolled instead. The review isn't, "I'm lazy." The review is, "I avoided starting because the task felt overwhelming. Tomorrow, I will open the document and write the first sentence before I touch my phone." That's a replacement action. It's executable. It changes the next day. Or you snapped at someone. The review isn't, "I'm a terrible person." It's, "I reacted without pause when I felt disrespected. Tomorrow, when I feel that spike, I'll take one slow exhale before I respond." Again, replacement action. This is why review builds discipline fast. It turns mistakes into training data, not identity. Now add one more layer that makes the review even more stoic. Ask yourself one question that Marcus would respect. Did I act according to reason or according to impulse? You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest. Honesty is the beginning of control. So tonight, before you sleep, do the 2 lines. Keep it under 2 minutes. If you miss a day, don't dramatize it. Start again the next night. The power is in repetition. And if you run this for a week, you'll feel something shift. You'll become harder to fool. Your excuses will sound less convincing. Your standards will become clearer. Discipline will stop being a performance and start being a pattern. Now we close the episode by tying the whole ladder together. Purpose, control, agency, self-trust, consistency, voluntary hardship, social influence, and review into one principle you can carry tomorrow morning when you don't feel like doing the work. Discipline isn't a personality trait. It's a chain of causes. And once you see the chain, you stop treating your failures like mysteries. It starts with purpose, because without a reason, discomfort feels like punishment, and your mind will bargain its way out. Purpose gives pain direction, then it tightens through control.